The stars above Earth had never looked so wrong. On a cold Tuesday night in February, the sky changed forever. 3,000 alien warships dropped out of hyperspace just beyond Jupiter, and their dark shapes blocked out the light of distant suns like a curtain being pulled across the heavens. Fleet Commander Zorath stood on the bridge of his massive flagship, a vessel so large that it could swallow mountains whole. His four eyes scanned the tactical display before him, watching the small blue planet that hung in the darkness like a jewel. He had seen many worlds like this one. He had conquered many worlds like this one. To him, Earth was nothing special, just another stop on the endless march of the Vortani Empire. The Vortani had ruled their corner of the galaxy for over 1,000 years. They had crushed 17 star systems in the past century alone, taking everything of value and leaving nothing behind but ash and slaves. Their warships were feared across 100 light years. Their soldiers were brutal and efficient. No species had ever stood against them and survived. Zorath allowed himself a small moment of satisfaction. This would be easy. His scouts had studied Earth for months before the invasion. The humans were clever little creatures, yes. They had managed to build rockets and satellites, and even a few primitive space stations. But they had no shields, no energy weapons, no technology that could threaten even the smallest Vortani fighter. They were children playing with toys, while adults came to take everything they owned. On Earth, it was just past 3 in the morning when the alarms began to sound. Admiral Kevin Brooks was pulled from sleep by the urgent ringing of his secure phone. He had served in the United Earth Defense Council for 40 years, rising through the ranks by being calm when others panicked and smart when others were confused. But nothing in his long career had prepared him for the words he heard that night. "Sir, we have contacts. Thousands of contacts. They're not ours." Kevin was dressed and in his car within 5 minutes. He drove through empty streets toward the mountain bunker that served as Earth's last line of defense. His mind was racing, but his hands were steady on the wheel. He had always known this day might come. Humanity had wondered for centuries whether they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer, and it was not a friendly one. The Situation Room was chaos when he arrived. Screens covered every wall, showing satellite feeds and radar data and the pale faces of frightened analysts. President Daniel Morrison was already there, his tie loose and his eyes tired. The Joint Chiefs of Staff stood around a central table, arguing in low voices about options that did not exist. "What do we know?" Kevin asked as he took his place at the table. A young officer named Maria Cruz pulled up the main display. 3,000 vessels, sir. They emerged from some kind of faster-than-light travel about 40 minutes ago. They're holding position near Jupiter, but they're moving toward us, slowly, like they want us to see them coming. The president looked at Kevin with desperate hope. "Can we fight them?" Kevin had spent his entire adult life building Earth's defenses. He had overseen the construction of orbital platforms and missile systems and early warning networks. He knew every weapon humanity possessed, and he knew the truth that he was about to speak. "No, sir. Not with anything they know about." Before the president could respond, the communications officer spoke up. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission. It's from the alien fleet." The main screen flickered, and then Zorath's face appeared. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 yellow eyes that seemed to look in different directions at once. When he spoke, his words were translated by some unknown technology into perfect English. "People of Earth, I am Fleet Commander Zorath of the Vartani Empire. Your world has been selected for incorporation into our domain. You will surrender unconditionally within 6 of your hours. Your population will be cataloged, sorted, and distributed to labor facilities across our territory. Any resistance will result in immediate planetary destruction. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact." The transmission ended, and silence filled the room. Maria Cruz was crying quietly at her station. The Joint Chiefs looked at each other with hollow eyes. The President sat down heavily in his chair and put his head in his hands. But Kevin Brooks did not despair. Instead, he walked to a secure terminal in the corner of the room and entered a code that only 4 people on Earth knew. A new screen appeared, showing a single word, Prometheus. "Mr. President," Kevin said, his voice calm and clear, "I need to tell you about something. Something we've been keeping secret for 60 years. Far away, on the dark side of the moon, Commander Elisa Grant received a signal she had waited her entire career to see. She was stationed at Lunar Base 1, a facility that officially did not exist. For 30 years, she had maintained systems that she barely understood, following protocols written by scientists who were now long dead. She picked up her secure communicator and spoke the words she had rehearsed 1,000 times. "Prometheus Station reporting. All systems are green. We are ready on your command." Kevin's voice came back through the static. "Stand by, Commander. We may need you soon." On the alien flagship, Zorath was celebrating with his officers. They drank strange liquids and laughed at the primitive planet below. One of his lieutenants wondered aloud if the humans would even bother to respond before the deadline. "They always respond," Zorath said with amusement. "They always beg and plead and offer us treasures we do not want. And then they die or they serve. It is the way of things." He looked out at the stars that his empire had conquered, and he felt only satisfaction. Tomorrow, Earth would belong to the Vortani. Its people would work in mines and factories until they were used up, and then they would be replaced by the next conquered species. It was efficient. It was practical. It was the only way the universe worked. But Zorath had made a mistake that many conquerors make. He had looked at humanity and seen only weakness. He had counted their weapons and measured their technology and concluded that they were helpless. He had not considered that humanity might have secrets. He had not imagined that this small blue world might be more dangerous than it appeared. And he had never, in all his years of conquest, encountered a species that would rather die than kneel down in the bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. Kevin Brooks was explaining the truth to his president. And as he spoke, the course of galactic history began to change forever. The bunker was quiet as Kevin Brooks finished speaking. President Daniel Morrison sat perfectly still, his coffee growing cold in his hands. The Joint Chiefs stared at the Admiral like he had just told them the magic was real. In a way, he had. 60 years, the President said slowly. "We've had this for 60 years. And no one told me?" Kevin nodded. "Only 4 people alive know the full truth, sir. The technology was discovered in 1969, buried under 3 miles of Antarctic ice. It took us decades just to figure out how to turn it on. The scientists who found it, they realized that if this knowledge fell into the wrong hands, it could destroy us faster than any alien invasion." He pulled up images on the screen. Strange machines, covered in symbols that no human language could match. Vast underground chambers filled with devices that hummed with power even after millions of years. "We don't know who built it," Kevin continued. "We don't know why they left it here. But we do know what it does. And we know that whoever created it faced the Vertani's ancestors a very long time ago. They left these weapons behind as a gift for whoever came next." The President stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the first light of dawn was touching the mountains. Somewhere out there, 12 billion people were waking up to the worst day in human history. They were afraid. They were praying. They were holding their families close and wondering if they would live to see another sunrise. "Can we win?" he asked. Kevin chose his words carefully. "Yes, sir. But there's no going back. Once we use this, the galaxy will know what we have." Every empire, every civilization, every species out there will learn that Earth is not what it appears to be. We'll never be overlooked again. And if we don't use it, then we die. Or worse, we become slaves. The president was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned around, and his eyes were hard. What do you need from me? 4 hours into the Vertani ultimatum, a small human vessel left Earth's atmosphere and headed toward the alien Armada. It was tiny compared to the warships that waited in the darkness, no larger than a bus. Inside, Ambassador Catherine Bell sat alone in the cockpit, watching the stars grow brighter as she left her world behind. Catherine was 67 years old. She had gray hair and deep lines around her eyes, marks of a life spent in hard places doing hard things. Before she became a diplomat, she had been a Marine. She had fought in 3 wars and buried too many friends to count. Fear was something she had learned to live with long ago. But today was different. Today, she carried a message that would change everything. The alien fleet grew larger in her view screen until it filled the entire display. Thousands of ships, each one bristling with weapons, each one carrying soldiers who had never known defeat. They were beautiful in a terrible way, like sharks circling in dark water. Her communicator crackled to life. Human vessel, you have entered restricted space. State your purpose or be destroyed. I am Ambassador Catherine Bell of Earth, she replied, keeping her voice steady. I request an audience with Fleet Commander Zorth. I carry a message from my government. There was a long pause. Then, proceed to the flagship. Any deviation from the assigned course will result in your immediate destruction. Catherine smiled grimly and adjusted her heading. The massive flagship loomed before her, a mountain of metal and menace. She docked at a small port on its side and was escorted by armed guards through corridors that seemed to go on forever. The bridge of the Eternal Dominion was enormous. Vertani officers moved between stations, their 4 eyes tracking her with curiosity and contempt. At the center of it all stood Zorth, tall and proud, looking down at her like she was an insect that had crawled onto his dinner table. You have 2 hours remaining, he announced. His voice was cold and flat. Your species wastes time with gestures. Catherine stepped forward until she stood directly beneath him. The guards tensed, but she ignored them. I'm not here to negotiate, she said calmly. I'm here to deliver a warning. One warning. You have 30 seconds to begin withdrawal from the solar system, or you will be destroyed. The bridge fell silent. Then Zorth made a sound that might have been laughter, and his officers joined in. The noise echoed off the walls like thunder. You threaten us? Zorth leaned down, his 4 eyes focusing on her face. 3,000 warships, human. Weapons that can crack planets like eggs. Soldiers who have conquered civilizations older than your entire species. And you threaten us? Catherine checked her watch. The numbers were counting down. 20 seconds, she said. We have crushed empires that made your world look like a grain of sand. We have harvested species by the billion. Your rockets cannot scratch our paint. Your bombs cannot breach our shields. 10 seconds. Zorth's amusement faded slightly. There was something in her eyes, something he had not seen before. It was not fear. It was not hope. It was something else entirely. What are you doing, human? Catherine looked up at him, and for just a moment, her expression softened into something like pity. I tried, she said quietly. Remember that. Whatever happens next, remember that we tried. She pressed a button on her wrist communicator, and her image flickered and disappeared. Back on her shuttle, she was already firing the engines, pushing the small vessel away from the flagship at maximum speed. Zorth watched her go, confusion mixing with anger in his alien mind. Destroy the shuttle, he ordered. Then begin planetary bombardment. I want this system cleansed by dinner." His weapons officer turned to obey. But before he could fire a single shot, something strange happened. Every alarm on the bridge began to sound at once. Red lights flashed across the tactical display as new contacts appeared from nowhere, rising from moons and asteroids and planets where nothing should have existed. "Commander," the tactical officer said, his voice shaking for the first time in his career, "we're detecting energy signatures. Thousands of them. They're everywhere." Zorath stared at the screen, and for the first time in his long life, he felt the cold touch of fear. "What is this?" he whispered. On her shuttle, racing toward Earth, Catherine Bell allowed herself one small moment of satisfaction. She had done her job. She had delivered the warning. What came next was out of her hands. Behind her, the ancient weapons of a dead civilization began to wake up. They had slept for millions of years, waiting for exactly this moment. Waiting for someone worthy to call upon their power. Humanity had found them. Humanity had learned their secrets. And now, humanity would show the galaxy that Earth was not a world to be conquered. The countdown had reached 0. Deep beneath the frozen wastes of Antarctica, in a chamber that had been sealed for millions of years, an old man sat before a console that hummed with power. Dr. Samuel Price was 83 years old. His hands were spotted with age, and his back was bent from decades of work. But his mind was still sharp, and his eyes were fixed on the screen before him with fierce concentration. He had been 23 when they first found this place. A young scientist on an expedition that was supposed to be studying ice cores. Instead, they had discovered something that changed everything humanity thought it knew about the universe. The chamber was vast, carved from rock that was older than life itself. Strange machines lined the walls, covered in symbols that no human language could translate. At the center stood a pillar of light that reached from floor to ceiling, pulsing with colors that had no names. This was the heart of the Prometheus Protocol, the greatest secret Earth had ever kept. Samuel remembered the early days, when they had struggled just to understand what they had found. The technology was so far beyond human science that it might as well have been magic. It took them 15 years just to figure out how to enter the main control room without triggering the defense systems. Another 20 years to learn how to communicate with the ancient machines. And another 25 to understand what they were actually for. The beings who built this place were long dead. Their civilization had risen and fallen while Earth was still covered in dinosaurs. But they had faced the Vortani, or something very much like them. And they had chosen to leave behind a gift for whoever came next. Weapons. Terrible, beautiful weapons hidden throughout the solar system. Waiting to be awakened, Lieutenant Maria Cruz sat at the station beside Samuel, her fingers moving across controls that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie. She was young, barely 30, but she had trained for this moment her entire adult life. "All platforms are responding," she reported. "Titan Station is online. Europa Station is online. Mars Defense Grid is active. Asteroid Belt Network is powered and ready." Samuel nodded slowly. Across the solar system, ancient machines were waking from their long sleep. On the frozen moon of Titan, buried under miles of ice and rock, a weapon platform the size of a city was rising to the surface. On Europa, beneath the vast underground ocean, similar systems were charging their power cores. On Mars, hidden beneath the red sands, targeting arrays were turning toward Jupiter and the alien fleet that waited there in the asteroid belt. Thousands of smaller platforms were activating one by one, like stars blinking to life in the darkness. Each one was capable of destroying a warship. Together, they could destroy anything. The secure channel crackled with Kevin's voice from Earth Command. "Prometheus Station, this is Admiral Brooks. Ambassador Bell is clear of the engagement zone. You are authorized to proceed with targeting. Samuel's hands hovered over the final control. He had spent 60 years preparing for this moment. He had hoped it would never come. Beginning target acquisition, Maria announced. 3,000 vessels confirmed. All targets locked. On the screen before them, the alien fleet appeared as red dots against the blackness of space. 3,000 ships, each one carrying soldiers and weapons and the cruel ambitions of an empire that had never learned mercy. In a few seconds, most of them would cease to exist. Samuel thought about the choice humanity was making. Once they fired these weapons, there was no going back. The galaxy would know that Earth was not what it appeared to be. Every empire and civilization out there would learn to fear this small blue world. Some might seek friendship. Others might seek revenge. But the alternative was worse. The alternative was slavery and death for 12 billion people. The alternative was the end of everything humanity had built and dreamed and hoped for. Samuel Price had spent his entire life studying these ancient weapons. He understood their power better than anyone alive. And he understood something else too. The beings who built them had not been conquerors. They had not used this technology to dominate others. They had used it only to defend themselves, and when they were finally gone, they had hidden it away for the next species that might need it. They had believed in giving others a chance. They had believed that some species deserved to survive and grow and reach for the stars. They had believed in hope. Now it was humanity's turn to decide what kind of species they wanted to be. Prometheus Station. Kevin's voice came again. We're running out of time. The alien fleet is powering weapons. Samuel looked at Maria. She was young enough to be his granddaughter. She had her whole life ahead of her, a life that would be shaped by what happened in the next few minutes. Are you ready? He asked. She met his eyes without flinching. I've been ready my whole life, Doctor. Samuel nodded and turned back to his console. His finger found the final button. This is Dr. Samuel Price at Prometheus Station. Authorization code verified. All platforms are hot. On your command, Admiral. There was a moment of silence. Then Kevin Brooks spoke the words that would echo through history. This is Admiral Brooks. Authorization code Omega-7-7. Fire. Samuel pressed the button. Across the solar system, ancient weapons that had waited millions of years finally spoke. Energy gathered in chambers that had been dark since before humans existed. Targeting systems locked onto 3,000 alien vessels with perfect precision. Power that could crack planets flowed through circuits that were older than the sun. And then, in perfect synchronization, they fired. Maria watched the screen as beams of dark energy lanced across the void. They moved faster than light itself, crossing distances that would take human ships years to travel in mere fractions of a second. The alien fleet had no warning. They had no time to react. The first wave of fire reached the outer edge of the Vertani Armada, and 600 ships simply vanished. They did not explode. They did not break apart. They were simply unmade. Their atoms scattered across space like dust in the wind. Samuel closed his eyes as the death toll climbed. This was necessary. This was justice. This was survival. But it was still death on a scale that humanity had never caused before. And he knew that he would carry the weight of it for whatever remained of his life. God forgive us, he whispered. God forgive us all. What happened in those 10 seconds would be remembered forever. Across the galaxy, civilizations would tell stories about this moment for thousands of years. Some would speak of it with fear. Others would speak of it with hope. But all of them would agree on one thing. Nothing was ever the same again. The first second began with light. Beams of dark energy erupted from hidden platforms across the solar system, converging on the alien fleet like spears thrown by angry gods. The Vortani sensors had no name for what they were detecting. Their computers could not process what was happening. Their officers could only stare in frozen disbelief as death came for them faster than thought. Fleet Commander Zorath was still standing on his bridge when the first wave hit. He watched 600 ships on the outer edge of his formation simply disappear. One moment they were there, proud warships carrying thousands of soldiers. The next moment they were gone, erased from existence as if they had never been real at all. In the second, Zorath tried to give orders. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His tactical officer was screaming something about impossible energy readings. His communications officer was calling for reports that would never come. The bridge was chaos, and Zorath found that he could not move, could not think, could not do anything but watch as his armada died around him. The third second brought understanding. Zorath's racing mind finally grasped what was happening. These weapons were not human. Humans could not build such things. No species in the known galaxy could build such things. This was something older, something from before the Vortani Empire existed, something that had been waiting in the darkness for exactly this moment. He had made a terrible mistake. He had looked at Earth and seen weakness. He had counted their rockets and measured their technology and concluded that they were helpless prey. He had never considered that they might have found something. He had never imagined that this small blue world might be guarding secrets older than the stars. In the fourth and fifth seconds, panic spread through the surviving ships. Captains who had never known fear in their lives began screaming orders to their navigation officers. Emergency hyperspace jumps were initiated across the fleet. Hundreds of vessels tried to flee, their engines burning hot, as they struggled to escape into the safety of faster-than-light travel. But the ancient weapons had anticipated this. They had been designed by beings who understood war in ways that modern species had forgotten. Gravity wells bloomed around each fleeing vessel, invisible traps that dragged them back into normal space. The ships that tried to jump found themselves going nowhere, their engines straining against forces they could not overcome. They were caught like insects in amber, unable to run, unable to hide, able only to wait for death. The sixth and seventh seconds brought fire to the heart of the fleet. Another wave of dark energy beams lanced across the void, striking the largest and most dangerous vessels first. The flagship Eternal Dominion was hit by 17 simultaneous beams, each one carrying enough power to shatter a moon. Zorath felt the ship shake around him. He saw the walls buckle and tear. He saw his officers thrown across the bridge like toys. And in that final moment, as the darkness closed in around him, he felt something he had not felt since he was a child. True, pure, absolute terror. The Eternal Dominion broke apart in silence. Pieces of the great warship scattered across space, tumbling end over end into the void. Zorath and his dreams of conquest died with it, unmourned and unmissed by a universe that had seen too many tyrants already. In the 8th and 9th seconds, the ancient weapons showed something unexpected. They showed mercy. The targeting system scanned the remaining vessels one by one, analyzing their purpose and their threat level with inhuman precision. Warships were destroyed without hesitation. Troop transports carrying soldiers meant to enslave humanity were broken apart and scattered. Command vessels and weapons platforms were reduced to atoms, but the supply ships were spared. The medical vessels were spared. The transports carrying workers and technicians who had never wanted to be part of this invasion were spared. The weapons did not kill blindly. They killed with purpose, removing the threat while preserving what did not need to be destroyed. In the 10th and final second, silence fell over the battlefield. Where 3,000 warships had hung against the stars, only debris remained. Twisted metal and frozen bodies drifted in the darkness, all that was left of the greatest fleet the Vortani Empire had ever assembled. But amid the destruction, 200 vessels still lived. They were crippled and afraid, their engines dead and their weapons cold. Their crews huddled in the darkness, waiting for death that did not come on Earth. Admiral Kevin Brooks watched the tactical display update in real time. The red dots representing enemy vessels were disappearing one by one, replaced by the gray symbols of destroyed targets. His staff stood in shocked silence, unable to believe what they were seeing. "It's over," Maria Cruz whispered from her station. "Sir, it's over. The fleet is gone." Kevin let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. His hands were shaking, and he gripped the edge of the table to steady himself. "No," he said quietly. "It's not over. It's just beginning." Ambassador Catherine Bell had reached Earth orbit when the firing stopped. She turned her shuttle around and looked back at the distant battlefield through her view screen. She could see nothing but stars and darkness. The mighty armada that had threatened her world was gone, erased in less time than it took to draw a breath. She sat alone in her cockpit and let herself feel the weight of what had just happened. Millions of lives had ended in those 10 seconds. Millions of beings who had families and dreams and fears of their own. They had come to conquer and enslave, yes. They had meant to destroy everything she loved. But they had still been alive, and now they were not. Catherine Bell had seen war before. She had killed enemies and lost friends. She understood that sometimes violence was necessary to protect the innocent. But she also understood that every death was a tragedy, even the deaths of those who wished you harm. She wiped her eyes and turned her shuttle toward home. There was still work to be done. The survivors needed to be dealt with. The galaxy needed to be told what had happened here. And humanity needed to decide what kind of future they wanted to build. The 10 seconds that changed everything were over. The hard part was about to begin. The silence after battle is different from ordinary silence. It has weight to it, a heaviness that presses down on everyone who survives. In the hours after the 10 seconds that destroyed the Vortani Armada, that silence hung over Earth like a blanket, broken only by the quiet sounds of people crying and praying and holding each other close in the bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. President Daniel Morrison stood before a communications console and prepared to speak to the survivors of the alien fleet. 200 vessels still floated in the darkness near Jupiter, their crews terrified and helpless. They had watched their comrades die. They had felt their ships lose power as the ancient weapons disabled their engines. Now they waited, certain that their deaths were coming. Kevin Brooks stood beside the president, his face tired but calm. They had spent the last several hours debating what to do with the survivors. Some advisors wanted to destroy them all, to leave no witnesses who could report back to the Vortani Empire. Others wanted to take them prisoner, to study their technology and learn their secrets. But the president had made a different choice. A harder choice. A more human choice. "Open the channel," he said. The communications officer nodded. And suddenly, Morrison's image was being broadcast to every surviving alien vessel. Thousands of Vortani watched from their crippled ships as a human leader appeared on their screens. They expected threats. They expected demands. They expected the cruelty that they themselves had shown to countless conquered species. They did not expect what they got. "People of the Vortani Empire," the president began, his voice steady and clear. "Your fleet has been destroyed. Your commander is dead. You are being allowed to live for one reason only: to carry a message home." He paused, letting his words sink in. On the alien vessels, officers and soldiers listened in confused silence. This was not how conquered species behaved. This was not how the weak spoke to the strong. "My name is Daniel Morrison, and I speak for the people of Earth. We did not ask for this war. We did not want this violence. When your fleet arrived in our system, we tried to warn you. We gave you a chance to leave in peace. You chose to stay. You chose to threaten our world and our people. And so we defended ourselves. The president's expression hardened slightly. Do not mistake our mercy for weakness. The weapons we use today are beyond anything your empire has ever seen. They were built by beings who faced your ancestors long ago, and they were left here for us to find. We have only begun to understand their full power. What you witnessed today was a fraction of what we are capable of. Kevin watched the president speak and felt a strange mix of pride and sadness. This was the moment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. Every word mattered. Every gesture would be remembered and repeated and analyzed by species they had not yet met. But we are not conquerors, Morrison continued. We do not wish to rule others or take what is not ours. We are a young species, still learning our place in the universe. We have made many mistakes in our history. We have hurt each other in countless ways. But we have also learned something important. True strength is not measured by how many you can destroy, but by how many you choose to spare. On the crippled alien vessels, something strange was happening. Soldiers who had spent their lives conquering and killing were listening to a human speak of mercy and restraint. It was so different from everything they had been taught, so different from the way their own leaders behaved, that they did not know how to respond. Go back to your empire, the president said. Tell them what you saw here today. Tell them that we have weapons you cannot comprehend, defenses you cannot overcome, and a will you cannot break. But tell them also that we reached out in peace before we reached out in war. Tell them that we spared those who posed no threat, even though we could have destroyed you all. He leaned forward, and his voice dropped to something almost gentle. And tell them this: if any species comes to us in friendship, they will find friends. If they come to trade and learn and grow together, they will find willing partners. Earth does not want enemies. Earth does not want subjects. Earth wants neighbors, fellow travelers in the long journey between the stars. Morrison straightened up, and his voice grew firm once more. But if any species threatens our world again, what happened to your Armada will happen to your homeworld. We will not strike first. We will always offer peace. But we will never, ever bow to those who come to enslave us. That is our promise. That is our warning. And that is our hope. The transmission ended, and silence fell once more. Deep beneath Antarctica, Samuel Price slowly powered down the ancient weapons. The platforms across the solar system fell quiet one by one, returning to their long sleep until they were needed again. He hoped they never would be. He knew they probably would. Maria Cruz sat beside him, her face pale in the dim light of the control room. She had helped kill millions of beings today. She had helped save billions more. The weight of both truths pressed down on her young shoulders. Do you think it was worth it? She asked quietly. Samuel was silent for a long moment. He thought about the beings who had built this place, millions of years ago. They had faced the same choice humanity faced today. They had chosen to fight, to defend themselves, to survive. And when they were finally gone, they had left their weapons behind for the next species that might need them. I think, he said slowly, that they gave us a chance. The beings who built all this, they could have hoarded their power. They could have hidden it away forever. But instead, they trusted that someday, someone worthy would find it. Someone who would use it not for conquest, but for protection. He turned to look at her, his old eyes filled with something that might have been hope. We have to prove them right, Maria. We have to show the galaxy that we were worth saving, that we can be better than the empires that came before us. That's the real test. Not whether we can destroy our enemies, but whether we can build something worth protecting. In the months that followed, the Vortani Empire collapsed. The survivors of the battle carried the president's message back to their homeworld, and it spread from there like fire through dry grass. A species that could destroy 3,000 warships in 10 seconds, yet chose to spare the helpless and offer peace to its enemies? That was something new. That was something the galaxy had never seen before. Some species feared Earth more than ever. They hid in their distant systems and watched the stars with nervous eyes, waiting for the humans to come and conquer them as so many others had done. But the humans did not come. They stayed on their small blue world, reaching out with offers of friendship and trade, never demanding, never threatening, simply waiting to see who would accept. Other species grew curious. They sent messages, then envoys, then diplomats. They came to Earth and walked its strange forests and swam in its vast oceans and marveled at the incredible diversity of life that covered every corner of this unlikely world. They met humans who were kind and humans who were cruel, humans who were wise and humans who were foolish, and they realized that this species was not so different from their own. Slowly, carefully, something new began to grow. Not an empire, but a community. Not conquest, but cooperation. Species that had fought each other for centuries found common ground on Earth. Neutral territory where old hatreds could be set aside. Trade routes opened. Knowledge was shared. The galaxy began to change, and on a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, humanity went back to its ordinary lives. People fell in love and raised children. Scientists made discoveries, and artists created beauty. Farmers grew food and builders raised cities. Life continued, as it always does, finding a way forward through darkness and light alike. But they never forgot the lesson of those 10 seconds. They never forgot that the universe was vast and dangerous and full of beings who would take everything they had if given the chance. They kept the ancient weapons ready, hidden and waiting, a final defense against any who might threaten their home. And they kept something else, too. They kept the hope that someday no one would need weapons at all. That someday, all the species of the galaxy would live together in peace. Sharing the stars as friends rather than fighting over them as enemies, was a distant dream, maybe an impossible one. But humanity had always been good at dreaming impossible dreams and then making them real. That was their gift, their curse, and their promise to the universe. The 10 seconds that changed everything were over. The long work of building something better had just begun.